What were the chances? After a decade of zero communication, there she was, my ex-wife, standing at a booth at the same convention I was attending. I'd vanished from her life, along with her new husband and his family, to ensure they'd never track me down. And I'd done a damn good job of it too. Yet, there she was, strolling past me without so much as a glance in my direction. She didn't even recognize me. That realization hit hard, and a little spark of an idea started forming in my mind. I'll admit it. I can be a bit of a jerk when the mood strikes. You're probably wondering why her husband's family would care about finding me. Funny thing, it's because they were my family once too. Yeah, you read that right. Her current husband is my biological older brother, which makes his parents my parents and his sisters my sisters. When everything came crashing down, I just walked away from it all and built an entirely new life. For the past 10 years, I've been known as Justin Reynolds. Justin was my middle name, and Reynolds? That came from a random sticker I spotted on a window when I needed a surname in a hurry. As for Sharon, back in high school, she was Sharon Bishop. We had one of those drawn-out, classic high school romances. First love, senior prom, and yes, we were each other's firsts. I thought I loved her, and I believed she loved me too. But in the end, she was more infatuated with my family's money than anything else. See, my family had money. Mom and Dad owned a mid-sized manufacturing company that produced electronic components. We did all right, though the Chinese crushed us on basic components with their unbeatable prices. We stayed afloat thanks to the Made in America demand, but our bread and butter was the custom, high-value components we designed to meet specialized client needs. That side of the business turned out to be quite lucrative. A little background on my family. My parents started the business long before I was born. Dad had a degree in electrical engineering, and his best friend, our co-founder, was a manufacturing engineer. My great-grandfather, though, is where the family wealth really began. During the Great Depression, he made a fortune by lending money to desperate families who couldn't afford their homes. When they defaulted, he seized the land, sometimes reselling the same property multiple times to different buyers. Not exactly a saint, but maybe that's where the family's questionable morals originated. Now, Aaron, my older brother, was the golden child. I also have two younger twin sisters who were doted on like princesses. Being the only girls in the family, they were spoiled rotten. Their worldview was simple. If something didn't directly impact them, they couldn't care less. And if it did, they always sided with whatever option caused them the least inconvenience. That attitude explained their behavior when the whole mess unfolded. Sharon and I followed all the cliches. We got married right after our sophomore year of college. Everything seemed fine for the first 5 years, until I came home early one day and found her in bed with my brother. That was when it all unraveled. Looking back, it was clear that I was just a stepping stone for her. Aaron was destined to inherit the family business, the prestige, and the societal standing that came with it. Meanwhile, I'd always be the worker bee, second in command, technically, but powerless compared to him. Sharon and I started dating our senior year of high school. We went to the same local college, but everything changed when she got pregnant at the end of our sophomore year. We married that summer, and she dropped out to raise our daughter while I finished my degree. My family helped us a lot in those early years, and by the time Helen turned 2, Sharon began working as an administrative assistant at the family business. Conveniently, there was an on-site daycare for employees. I couldn't help but wonder sometimes how she got pregnant, considering we always use protection. To my knowledge, nothing ever failed. Sharon couldn't take the pill due to some adverse reaction, so that wasn't an option either. I chalked it up to things happen. Still, over the next 5 years, there were odd moments. Twice, she had strange medical issues that prevented us from being intimate for about a week. At the time, I didn't overthink it. I wanted more kids, specifically a son. Don't get me wrong, I loved my daughter, but there's something about the idea of having a boy to carry on the family name. Yeah, I can hear all the feminists out there saying daughters can keep their name, or that fathers can teach their daughters everything they teach a son. And sure, girls can love muscle cars, sports, and even become gearheads just like boys. I get it. Still, the desire for a son is practically hardwired into a guy's brain. You know how it is. Most men want a son to carry on the family name. Don't get me wrong, I adored my daughter and was thrilled to have her in my life. But the idea of adding a son to the mix felt like the perfect way to round out our little family. With our 5-year wedding anniversary coming up, I decided to surprise Sharon with a gift, a matching set of earrings and a necklace from a local jeweler. I had it all planned out. I'd sneak out of work to pick up the jewelry, swing by the house while Sharon was still at the office, and hide it until our big day. Both of us worked at my family's business, which had an employee daycare, so she didn't have to worry about watching our daughter during the day. After picking up the gift, I headed home. As I turned onto our street, I spotted Aaron's car parked in my driveway. That struck me as odd. He should have been at work, and there was no reason for him to be at my house during the day. A sinking feeling crept over me. Instead of pulling into the driveway, I parked a couple of houses down and walked back to the house. The front door was unlocked. Quietly, I followed the sound of voices to the master bedroom. And there they were, Sharon and Aaron, enjoying themselves like they didn't have a care in the world. Even now, I'm not sure how I managed to stay calm. Instead of barging in, I quietly recorded about 5 minutes of video before slipping out of the house. During those minutes, I overheard just enough to confirm that this wasn't a one-time thing. It had been going on for years. Despite the fury boiling inside me, I knew I couldn't afford to act impulsively. Losing my temper would only lead to more humiliation and cost me financially. Divorce laws in this country don't exactly favor the husband, especially when there's a child involved. Sharon would end up with the house, and I'd be stuck with the mortgage. She'd get custody and child support, while I'd get reduced visitation rights. She'd even get spousal maintenance, aka alimony, and I'd be paying for her to shack up with my brother. To minimize the fallout, I decided to play the long game. Oh, and there was no way she was getting the jewelry I just bought her. It took me 3 months to get everything ready. You might think I spent that time finding excuses to avoid Sharon, but you'd be wrong. I kept up appearances, playing the role of the devoted husband and father. She was still a stunning woman with an amazing body, and honestly, it wasn't like she was sleeping with the entire town, just my brother. If I suddenly distanced myself, it would raise suspicion. So, I did what any good actor would do. I gave the performance of a lifetime. Here's the thing they underestimated. I was the IT manager for the family business. My job gave me full access to all the company's technology, computers, machines, even the coffee makers in the break room. I was the only one with the God codes, which allowed me to access every device in the company. If it had a chip or ran on software, I controlled it. A little pro tip: if you're planning to stab your IT guy in the back, don't use company equipment to communicate about it. Within 5 minutes of sitting down at my desk, I was reading Sharon's and Aaron's text messages and emails. And what I found blew me away. Not only had Sharon and Aaron been at it for years, but my parents and sisters knew about it and approved. One text from my mom warned my sisters to be careful not to let anything slip to me. My entire family had betrayed me. If you're thinking I'd reached my breaking point, you're right. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Helen wasn't my daughter. She was Aaron's. Those two mysterious medical issues that had prevented Sharon and me from being intimate, they were abortions of my children. Sharon had terminated 2 pregnancies when I was the father but kept Aaron's baby. That was the final straw. They all had to pay. As I pieced everything together, it became clear their motives were as old as time: greed. Aaron was the heir apparent to the family business, while I was nothing more than a cog in the machine. I was just a placeholder, an IT guy they could use to keep the company running until they found a replacement. In the meantime, I was raising Aaron's child and supporting Sharon, which saved Aaron money. Their plan was for Sharon to divorce me and marry Aaron when the timing was convenient. They assumed I'd quietly accept my lot and continue working for the family, none the wiser. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. Aaron had it all figured out. He'd use the time to build up his finances, so he could better support Sharon and Helen after they made their move. The plan included never telling me the truth about Helen's parentage, ensuring I'd be stuck paying years of child support for a child who wasn't even mine. Over the next 3 months, I set my counterplan in motion. I began slowly siphoning money from our family's investment accounts into a newly created account in the Cayman Islands. To add to the pot, I suggested to Sharon that we take out a second mortgage to fund a massive swimming pool and entertainment area in our backyard. Predictably, she loved the idea. A luxury backyard makeover would let her and Aaron host fancy gatherings while I footed the bill. It took a month for the loan to process, and once approved, I funneled that money straight into my offshore account too. To keep up appearances, I brought home blueprints every couple of weeks, pretending to work on the pool project. I even designed the plans myself during office hours. I went so far as to post an ad online and schedule bids from contractors. Sharon and I ended up interviewing 5 different companies, though nothing ever came of it. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to install hidden high-definition cameras in our house while Sharon was at work. These cameras captured both video and audio, uploading everything to a secure cloud server that only I, the PI, and my divorce lawyer could access. On top of that, I continued collecting copies of Sharon and Aaron's emails and texts, printing hard copies for safekeeping in a safety deposit box I'd opened under my alias, Justin Reynolds. I wasn't naive. I knew that when the truth came out, my entire family would be out for blood. They'd try to harass me, drag my name through the mud, and reclaim whatever they thought I owed them. So, I prepared myself. I created fake social media profiles and even built a website for Justin Reynolds, presenting him as a wealthy entrepreneur with an MBA and dual bachelor's degrees in business administration and international finance. Sure, the credentials wouldn't hold up to a deep investigation, but that didn't matter. They were convincing enough for my purposes. With a few forged documents, a touch of dark web trickery, and a small transfer of cash, I had everything I needed to establish my new identity. And because words from liars and cheaters mean nothing, I needed indisputable proof. I swabbed Helen's cheek while she slept, got my own sample, and swiped Aaron's DNA from a glass he'd used during a party. I mailed the samples for testing using my company email, knowing I was the only one with access to every email account in the system. The results confirmed what I already suspected. Helen wasn't mine. She was Aaron's daughter. The 2 medical issues Sharon had years ago? Abortions of my children. She kept Aaron's baby but terminated mine. That was it. They had to pay, and I was going to make sure they did. Aaron would get his comeuppance, and the family business would feel the impact too. Aaron had always been an arrogant bully, and his incompetence as a leader was going to sink the company. I just gave him a little push. Using my IT skills, I created fake accounts, generated bogus invoices, and embedded subtle lines of code into the company's financial software. Nothing too obvious, but enough to hurt when discovered. The family owed me for what they did, and this would ensure I was financially secure if I needed to vanish completely. Then I built my masterpiece, a software time bomb. This wasn't a literal bomb, but a devastating program designed to wreak havoc on the company's operations. It was set to trigger under specific conditions, causing every computer, smartphone, and machine in the company to crash simultaneously. CNC machines and milling equipment would go haywire, creating chaos on the production floor. I could trigger it remotely or let it activate automatically when certain events unfolded. It was my ace in the hole. The day finally arrived. I knew it might have been smarter to orchestrate everything from a distance, but I couldn't resist watching the carnage unfold in person. A train wreck is hard to look away from, especially when you know it's coming. I had a contingency plan in case things got physical, but it turned out I didn't need it. I was waiting in the lobby when she walked in. She was in her mid-20s, dressed sharply, and absolutely stunning. She carried a briefcase and 3 manila envelopes tucked under her arm. That was the signal. It was time to start the show. Smiling, I walked into my father's office. Without a word, I tossed a sealed envelope onto his desk. He looked up, confused. "What's this?" he asked. I raised my hand and spread my fingers, holding them up like a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I counted down, lowering one finger with each number. As I reached the end of the countdown, a loud, anguished wail echoed from outside. I raised my hand for another countdown. 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2, 1. A man's voice shouted from the hallway. "What the hell is going on?" One last countdown, and then she appeared. A blonde bombshell stepped into my father's office doorway, her voice dripping with a sweet Georgia drawl that sounded like peaches soaked in honey. "Mr. Glenn Brooks?" she asked. "Yes, that's me," my father replied, his brow furrowed. She handed him the final envelope. "Y'all have been served. Have a nice day," she said cheerily, snapping a quick photo of him holding the papers before striding out the door. I couldn't help but laugh as I made my exit, leaving before anyone could recover enough to stop me. The letter I dropped on my father's desk was my immediate resignation, citing a hostile work environment. I laid out in no uncertain terms that the company's management and its owners had actively condoned the sexual relationship between the company president, Aaron, and the wife of one of their managers, me. Of course, Sharon had been served divorce papers, and Aaron was hit with a lawsuit for creating a hostile workplace and for alienation of affection. I even sued him for back child support and future child support since he was Helen's biological father. As for me, I had already removed all my personal belongings from my office and quietly cleared out the things I wanted from the house. Financially, everything was already in place. Sharon got the house in the divorce, but I had drained most of the savings account. My lawyer had power of attorney to handle everything in my absence. When the door closed behind me that day, Michael Brooks ceased to exist. Justin Reynolds was born. That was the last time I saw any of them for the next 10 years. Sharon tried to claim alimony, but since I was unemployed and she was now making more than me, my lawyer made sure that went nowhere. As for child support, the DNA evidence I provided proved Helen wasn't my daughter, and the court ruled in my favor. Aaron had to pay me several $100,000 for the years I spent supporting his child. Aaron and Sharon moved into the house before the week was out. I relocated to the West Coast. Although my alienation of affection lawsuit against Aaron didn't hold up, it rarely does, I still came out ahead. Aaron was forced to pay $200,000 for the hostile work environment, and the company settled for $2 million after I proved they had known about and encouraged the affair. Between the lawsuits, the money I siphoned off, and my investments, I walked away with over $4 million. Sharon might have been entitled to half the savings, but good luck finding me, or the cash. 6 months after the dust settled, I triggered the software bomb I'd planted. It fried the company servers and corrupted the coding for the CNC machines. Financial records were lost, and the machines began producing defective parts. For 2 weeks, the company couldn't meet production deadlines, throwing off schedules and straining relationships with clients. It was chaos. I used the money to start my own IT consulting firm, setting it up as an offshore LLC to keep my identity under wraps. The business thrived, and I became highly successful. 2 years after I left, I was involved in a car accident that required significant facial reconstructive surgery. While undergoing the procedure, I decided to tweak a few features I'd always disliked. My nose, which I thought was too big, was reshaped, and my weak chin was strengthened. For years, I'd kept a goatee to hide my chin, but after the surgery, I began shaving clean. The changes were subtle, but enough to make me look completely different. The trucking company responsible for the accident covered the cost of the surgery. Their driver had been on speed, driving well past his hours, and using a falsified logbook. The truck itself hadn't been properly maintained. When the dust settled, I ended up owning the trucking company. I overhauled its operations, instituted strict safety protocols, and fired 5 drivers who refused to comply. The accident turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Not only did I rebuild myself physically, but it also forced me to adopt a more disciplined lifestyle. The physical therapy was grueling, but it sparked a new passion for fitness. What began as a necessary recovery routine transformed into a full-blown workout regimen. I went from being a lean, average office worker to a muscular, confident man with a six-pack and broad shoulders. For the first time, I felt strong, both inside and out. The company's reputation turned around quickly under my leadership. I had to sit down with the NTSB regulators and outline my plans for improvement first, keeping them updated every step of the way. Once the insurance companies saw the changes I implemented, they dropped our rates. Word spread fast about the new safety standards and reliability, and business started booming. Deliveries were not just on time, but also safer than ever. I hired a few skilled mechanics to ensure all our trucks and trailers were properly maintained. Between my consulting business, the trucking company, and a portfolio of smart investments, I was sitting pretty financially. And now, here I was, staring across the room at my ex-wife for the first time in 10 years. Old feelings of betrayal and anger bubbled to the surface. Sure, I had cut them all out of my life, but the truth was, they never really paid for what they did to me. I had built a new life, but revenge? That part had always eluded me, until now. A wicked idea began to form in my mind. I would pay them back, the same way they betrayed me, using their weaknesses against them. Sharon hadn't recognized me. She walked past, her eyes meeting mine, and smiled. One of those unconscious smiles women give when they find someone attractive. It wasn't flirty, just a subtle signal. That was my cue. This was going to be fun. I knew exactly what bait to use and how to reel her in. Curious, I pulled out my phone to check the date. Perfect. My plan could be expanded for maximum effect. I walked over to the booth where Sharon stood, pretending to browse the brochures on the table. I didn't care about her company's products, but she didn't need to know that. "Do you have any questions about our products or services?" she asked, her voice polite and professional. Feigning surprise, I looked up. "Actually, I do," I replied, adding a small smile. "But I don't have the time right now to get into it. I'm interested in a couple of your offerings, and I'll need a large supply. Unfortunately, I have a meeting to get to." "Oh," she said, a little disappointed. "Well, can you stop by later?" "I wish I could," I said, glancing at my watch. "But my schedule is packed. I won't be free until around 7 o'clock this evening, and that's when the expo closes." "Maybe we could talk later then," she offered, clearly interested. I pulled out my business card and handed it to her. "Tell you what," I said, "I'll be at the hotel tonight. If you give me a call, we can meet somewhere to go over everything." Then I added, as if the idea had just occurred to me, "Or how about dinner? I'll make reservations at Mario's here in the hotel for 7 o'clock. I've heard it's one of the best Italian places in town." I deliberately glanced at her left hand. "And feel free to bring your husband along. It's just a business dinner, after all." Her smile widened, betraying her excitement. "It'll just be me," she said. "My husband couldn't make it this time." "That's fine," I said, shrugging. "Do you want to invite any of your colleagues?" She hesitated for a split second. "Unfortunately, they're all unavailable." "It'll just be me," she said smoothly. No way was she sharing a potential commission. "Perfect," I said, flashing her a warm smile before strolling away. I didn't actually have a meeting to attend. I returned to my penthouse suite to prepare for the evening. After showering and shaving, I selected another tailored Armani suit. Wearing the same one I'd had on earlier would have been a rookie mistake. I needed to maintain the image of wealth and sophistication. When I arrived at Mario's, Sharon was already waiting in the lobby. She had clearly gone all out to impress. Her little black dress was cut low in the front and high on the hem, paired with towering heels that made her legs look even longer. The plunging neckline left no doubt she wasn't wearing a bra, and the tight fit of the dress molded to her curves so snugly that I couldn't see any panty lines. She was stunning, and it was obvious she wanted to dazzle me. Forget dangling the bait. She was practically begging to take it straight from my hand. Over dinner, she answered all my questions about her company's products and explained why they were superior to the competition. But this wasn't about the products. It was about setting the stage for what came next. She didn't realize she was playing right into my hands. We talked about costs and quantities over dinner, and I made all the right noises about being impressed. I assured Sharon that when we were ready to place an order, we'd go directly through her. I explained that we couldn't finalize anything right now because my team was still figuring out the exact order size, where the units would be distributed, and a few other logistical details. I promised that whatever we decided would be sorted out within the next 2 weeks. Of course, what she didn't know was that I had absolutely no need for her products, and even if I did, I'd never buy them from her company. I'd go straight to her biggest competitor instead. When dinner wrapped up, I suggested it was still early and proposed heading to the nightclub next door for a couple of drinks and maybe some dancing. She eagerly agreed. I was almost certain she'd done a little research on me before dinner, probably confirming online that I was as wealthy as I appeared. By the way she clung to my arm and pressed herself against me as we danced, I couldn't help but wonder if she was already considering trading up again. After a few drinks and several dances, we ended up back in my suite. No, she wasn't drunk. She knew exactly what she was doing. In fact, she was the one who suggested it. I could practically see the dollar signs gleaming in her eyes. By the way, I discovered earlier at the club that she wasn't wearing panties. When I slid my hand up her thigh, she just smiled and parted her legs slightly in invitation. "I'm not on the pill," she murmured as I kissed her neck and nibbled her earlobe. "Don't worry," I replied, keeping her distracted. "I've been snipped, and I'm allergic to latex, so I can't use protection." "Okay," she agreed without hesitation. She probably should have given it more thought, but I made sure to keep her mind elsewhere. That night, we went 3 rounds. By the next day, she'd moved her things into my suite, and for the rest of the conference, we slept together every night. On the final morning of the event, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "So, is there a Mrs. Reynolds? A fiancée or girlfriend?" I smiled, ready to play this one out. "Nope. I was married once, but we split up after a couple of years. We were too young, and we just drifted apart. Since then, I haven't found the right person, but I think it's about time to settle down." Her face lit up. "Well, I'd definitely like to see you again," she said. "I've really enjoyed spending time with you. It's not just that you're an amazing lover. I also like talking to you and just being with you." "And your husband?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Won't that cause some complications if we were to start dating full-time?" She waved it off. "We're basically just roommates at this point. We don't even sleep in the same room anymore. I can't even remember the last time we had sex." I nodded thoughtfully. "Well, before I can commit to anything serious, I need to focus on some business matters. I'll be traveling a lot over the next few months, but once I'm free, I'll reach out if you're still available." After 2 more rounds of sex, we cleaned up, packed, and checked out of the hotel. She went her way, and I went mine with a promise to stay in touch. The moment I got back to my room, I ripped up her business card and tossed it in the trash. The following Monday, I contacted a security firm I kept on retainer and tasked them with keeping a close eye on Sharon and my former family for the next few months. Despite what Sharon had told me, she and her husband were far from just roommates. The security team managed to plant hidden cameras and microphones in their home, capturing everything. They had sex 3 to 4 times a week. Sure, it was illegal as hell, but this firm was incredibly good at getting the information I needed. One discovery stood out. Aaron was completely faithful to Sharon, at least at present. I couldn't vouch for the previous 10 years. He was also eager to have another child, preferably a boy. I also learned they had a ritual where they try to exhaust each other with sex the night before either of them had to travel. 2 months later, the information I'd been waiting for arrived. Through the cameras, I watched Sharon decorate the living room in anticipation of Aaron's return from work. When he walked through the door, she beamed and said, "Congratulations, Daddy. You managed to knock me up again." Aaron looked stunned, then overjoyed. "How far along are you?" he asked. "About 2 months," she replied. "It must have happened either the night before I left for that week-long conference in Vegas or the night I got back." Apparently, Sharon still believed I was shooting blanks. Later, she left me a tearful voicemail, saying she and Aaron had reconciled and she couldn't run off with me anymore. That gave me a good laugh. After that, I had the security company remove the cameras and stop surveillance. I had all the information I needed. I set a reminder in my Outlook calendar and waited. Nearly 9 months to the day after the conference, I checked the birth announcements from my hometown. There it was, a photo of Sharon holding a newborn baby boy, with Aaron smiling proudly over her shoulder. By then, I had finalized the transition of all my businesses to new management and was relaxing in my hacienda in Costa Rica, looking at the picture online. No, I didn't plan to stay there forever, but for now, life was good. The hacienda in Costa Rica was just one of several properties I owned across the globe. But Justin Reynolds didn't live there, because Justin Reynolds didn't exist anymore. He was an alias, a phantom. If anyone ever managed to connect the dots, they'd realize it was a dead end. It was time to finish my revenge. Switching to a Gmail account I'd created specifically for this purpose, I prepared to see the story unfold from Sharon's perspective. According to the reports I'd arranged to monitor her online activity, it had been 2 weeks since little Justin was born. I chuckled at her audacity when I read her journal entry. "I'm still not sure how I convinced Aaron to name the baby Justin," she'd written. No, I'm not under any delusions. Justin isn't the father. He had a vasectomy, and he even showed me the medical report. Aaron knocked me up either the night before I left for the Vegas conference or the night I got back. But naming the baby Justin is my little way of holding onto the memory of that incredible week. Aaron was thrilled at first, finally having a son, but lately, he's been acting strange. Something's off, but I can't figure out what. She went on to describe her day. Putting the baby down for a nap, Helen texting her friends upstairs, and starting dinner. Then came the part I'd been waiting for. The front door slammed open so hard it rattled the walls. Aaron stormed in, his face red with fury. "You cheating expletive," he bellowed. "How many times have you cheated on me?" Sharon was stunned. "What are you talking about, Aaron? I've never cheated on you." She struggled to process his outburst. There was no way he could know about Vegas, at least, not with any proof. Aaron threw an envelope at her. Behind him, his parents and twin sisters filed into the room, their faces grim. Sharon barely caught the envelope before it hit the floor. "Who the hell is he?" Aaron demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sharon stammered. Aaron took a deep breath, his voice steady but seething. "2 weeks ago, I got an email with a link to a website. It had videos, tons of them, of you screwing some guy at the Vegas conference 9 months ago. The email also suggested I get a DNA test on the baby. So I did. And guess what? I'm not the biological father." Sharon's face drained of color as she opened the envelope. The DNA test results stared back at her. Aaron wasn't the father. The results showed about a 40% likelihood of paternity, indicating that while Aaron and Justin shared some DNA, the baby had inherited additional markers that didn't match either parent. She scrambled for an explanation. "Aaron, look, it says you and Justin carry the same DNA, so you're related. That must mean—" "No," Aaron interrupted, cutting her off. "It says I only share some DNA with him. At best, that means—" Aaron's voice trailed off as a look of horror spread across his face. His mother gasped, her voice trembling. "Oh my God. Michael." Sharon froze. Her mind reeled as the pieces clicked into place. She tried to dismiss the possibility, but the evidence was undeniable. Aaron wasn't the father, but he was closely related to the real father. The only possible candidate was Michael, Aaron's brother. Justin had to be Michael in disguise. Sharon's heart raced as the realization struck her. That week in Vegas? It had been during her fertile window. Michael, no, Justin, must have known. He had orchestrated everything. And now, in the cruelest twist of fate, she had accidentally done to Aaron what she'd done to Michael years ago. She had cucked one brother with the other. Michael knew, and he had done it on purpose. She screamed, her voice raw with shock and frustration. "What are you talking about?" Glenn, Aaron's father, demanded, his confusion mounting. But Sharon barely heard him. Her mind was spinning, replaying every calculated move Michael had made. It was all deliberate. He'd faked the vasectomy report, manipulated her, and ensured that his revenge would cut to the bone. As the room erupted into chaos, I sat back in my hacienda, savoring the culmination of years of planning. Revenge wasn't just about payback, it was about precision, and I'd executed it perfectly. He looked so different from the Michael Brooks of 10 years ago, almost unrecognizable. But there was no doubt in my mind that he recognized me. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every move was calculated. He seduced me effortlessly, pushing all the right buttons. He even showed me a medical report proving he'd had a vasectomy. And he must have remembered that my cycle was as predictable as clockwork. He had to know that week was my peak fertility. Oh my God. He must have remembered the 2 abortions I'd had to avoid having his children back then. He planned this. He wanted this. Well, screw him. He sued me for Helen's child support, so I'll sue him for child support for his son. Except Justin Reynolds didn't exist any more than Michael Brooks did. Aaron's attempt to file a child support suit went nowhere because, legally speaking, you can't sue someone who doesn't exist. Aaron and Sharon stayed together, though it was clear their relationship was beyond repair. For Aaron, it was a matter of finances. He'd already be paying child support for both Helen and Justin, plus spousal support, the mortgage on their house, and dividing half their assets if they divorced. It was cheaper to keep her. So, they stayed together, living in a hollow marriage. They still had sex now and then, but it wasn't about love anymore. Just two people scratching an itch. When Justin left for college, they sold the house and quietly went their separate ways. Don't worry about little Justin. Despite the drama surrounding his birth, he grew up happy and cared for. His grandparents doted on him, spoiling him like they did with all their grandchildren. Sharon's maternal instincts remained intact, and Aaron, for all his faults, had always wanted a son. No one outside their inner circle ever found out about Justin's true parentage, and the family agreed to keep it that way. They never had any more children after Justin, and their lives continued in parallel mediocrity. As for me, life moved on. I eventually remarried and had 3 children, 1 boy and 2 girls. I adore them, and they've given me more joy than I ever thought possible. Occasionally, I think about my other son, Justin. It would be nice to know him, to have him in my life, but I know that's not an option. Maybe after he turns 18, I'll consider reaching out to him quietly. Until then, he'll remain a distant thought. When I'm gone, though, he's in for a surprise. He's included in my will. No one will see it coming, least of all Sharon or Aaron. Over the years, I sent my parents a series of anonymous emails. The first announced my wedding, one they would never attend, with a daughter-in-law they would never meet. The next 3 emails shared the births of my children, their grandchildren whom they'd never know. It was my way of making them feel the void they created when they betrayed me. From what I hear, they've spent a small fortune on private investigators trying to track me and my family down. Good luck with that. You might think I went too far, and maybe you're right. I'm not here to argue. But before you judge, remember what they did to me. My brother betrayed me, so I flipped the script. My ex-wife deliberately avoided having children with me, but chose to have a child with my brother instead. So, I turned the tables and tricked her into having my son while she was married to him. In my eyes, that's justice. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.